So good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to May's second governing body meeting in public, which is going to be broadcast online. This is a sort of an extraordinary meeting of the governing body that we have once per year, and it is to receive our annual report, our audited financial accounts, and in particular this year, what we'd like to do is to focus on some of the work that we've been doing as a CCG and to celebrate some of the real impact that we've been making in terms of improving health and care services for people in Sheffield. So before we begin, I have apologies for absence from Zach McMurray, Brian Hughes and Sandy Buchan. And we've also had apologies from non-voting members, Nikki Normington, Paul Wyke, Greg Fell, and John McElwraith, and also Judy Robinson from Healthwatch. And we're aware that Trish Edney, you've come to represent Healthwatch this afternoon, so welcome, Trish. So I can confirm that with the numbers of people we have this afternoon, the meeting is quorate, and because of that, we shall proceed ahead. So I would just like to ask members of governing body, does anybody have any conflicts of interest they wish to declare at this stage that are not previously registered? Nope. Okay, thank you. So I'll move us on to questions from the public. We have received one question which came in today from a member of the public regarding cardiac rehabilitation services. We've had a detailed look at that particular question, and some of the points in the question are quite specific to individual experience. So our plan as a governing body will be to contact the member of the public who submitted those questions and to open a direct dialogue around those specific issues, as we didn't feel they were particular strategic issues for the governing body. So before I move on, I just want to check with Kath, have there been any further questions from the public that have come in since this morning? No. Okay. So I'll move us straight into the main part of the agenda then, which is part 5, and that's paper A, and that's the adoption of the Sheffield CCG audited financial accounts for the financial year 2020 to 2021. And I'll hand over to Jackie Mills, our Director of Finance.
Thank you, Terry. So governing body will recall that we received the draft accounts at the meeting on the 6th of May. I'm pleased to report since that time the auditors, KPMG, have substantially completed their review of those accounts, as well as the annual report. The paper that has been circulated, sorry, it was a separate late paper due to the timing of the audit. The paper confirms that there has been one minor change agreed with the auditors, and that is in respect of an audit fee that was omitted from the draft accounts in relation to the mental health investment standard audit. That adjustment increases our total expenditure by £12,000, which means we have a revised in-year surplus of £3,020,000. Governing body members will recall that we have been forecasting since the second half of last year that the £3 million surplus that relates to the ICS would be reported. So there's just a very, very small in-year additional surplus that relates to the CCG's own activities. In terms of the auditors' review, the auditors have produced an ISA report. Sorry, and that confirms that there is just one unadjusted audit difference, and that relates to our prescribing spend. So when we produce the accounts, we have to estimate the final month's worth of prescribing expenditure that related to March 2021. During the progress of the audit, the final position has come in for the prescribing, and actually the final figure was £938,000 less than the accrual that we had included in the accounts. So we just note that as an unadjusted audit difference, because the figures that we had included at the point in which we produced the accounts were a reasonable estimate. In terms of the ISA 260, it notes that KPMG intend to issue an unqualified opinion on the accounts. There are a small number of outstanding items that they just need to verify, but at this stage, neither ourselves or the auditors anticipate that that will mean any further changes are required. And they also confirmed, and the statement has changed this year in terms of value for money, they've confirmed that they have not identified any significant weaknesses in our arrangements for securing value for money. The statement previously was more positive, as in that we had adequate arrangements in place. It is a national change to the way in which they're providing their audit assurance. So before I go on to the next steps, I just wanted to invite Anthea to note the review that the Audit Committee undertook this morning in terms of the accounts and the annual report, and just ask her to confirm the recommendations of the Audit Committee.
Thank you, Jackie. My name is Anthea Morris. I'm a lay member of the governing body and I'm chair of the Audit and Integrated Governance Committee. We met this morning, as Jackie said, to review the financial statements, the annual report, the external auditors ISA 260, which is what used to be called the management letter, as well as the management representation letter. We've also met with external audit, who were also at that meeting. So I can confirm what Jackie said. We've been through the outstanding matters in the audit with KPMG, and they're not foreseeing any difficulties in closing off those matters, or if it notices any change in the accounts. There may be that if a presentational requirement is required by Public Health England over the next 2 weeks before the accounts are submitted, they will run that back through Jackie, and she will outline the process if that is to happen, which we are not expecting it to happen. But Audit Committee did review them. We have received them, and we recommend their approval to governing body.
Thank you, Anthea. So in light of that recommendation, what we expect will happen now is that we will ask governing body to approve that Leslie and Terry sign the letter of management representations. Once that letter is received by the auditors, we need to do two things. One is to process that small adjustment that I described through our financial ledger. That the financial ledger won't reopen again until the 4th of June, so we can't action that at this stage. So once we've undertaken that amendment to the ledger, the auditors will do their final check. We'll make sure there's no further recommendations from NHS England about any changes to the accounts. If in the unlikely sorry, I can't find my words there. If NHS England do recommend some changes, what we've agreed, what we're asking for is that governing body delegate to Anthea as chair of the Audit and Integrated Governance Committee to sign off any changes, just to make sure that there's some oversight to that. Once any changes are agreed, we will receive an audit certificate signed by the auditors and then submit our audited accounts before the 15th of June, which is the national deadline. I just also wanted to note that Carol did send out to people, and we have received back from the majority the audit declaration. So that's the declaration that all governing body members should make either during or ahead of this meeting, just to note that there's nothing that they haven't raised for the attention of the auditors. So the only returns we haven't yet had are from people that aren't actually in attendance at this meeting. So we will chase that up before the auditors, before the management representation letter is signed and submitted to the auditors. So I think, Terry, if you're happy, I'm happy to take any questions, but and then if we go through the recommendations in the paper and just confirm we're happy to do those.
Okay, thank you, Jackie. Do any members of governing body have any questions for Jackie? Okay, Jackie, you've escaped lightly there, no questions, but also accepting that we did discuss this at some length just 2 weeks ago. So I think many of the questions governing body had were brought up there. I've just seen Chris Neal's hand go up. So Chris, do you want to come in, please?
It wasn't so much a question as just this is a excellent summary of all the work that's happened, and not just the work, but how it's had a positive effect on the community, and that we've been able to respond really quickly in such a difficult, challenging year. And also, this has come from the audit committee as well, that the putting the new arrangements for governance in place alongside those other command structures, and particularly as chair of primary care, I wanted to recognise the work of primary care that have kept open and really done an amazing job with the vaccination. So it was just to underline that's in this report. So thank you.
Okay, thank you for that comment, Chris. It's always helpful to bring the numbers to life and see what impact they're making. So I think that was a really helpful observation that you've just brought up there. Does anybody else have any comments or questions before we move on to the recommendations? Okay, so no hands going up at this stage. So this paper is specifically asking us for a number of recommendations, and I'm just picking up on the additional recommendation that Jackie's made during her summary there. So the first thing is we are to note the verbal update from the chair of the audit committee, Anthea Morris, which we have noted. Our second recommendation is to approve and adopt the final audited accounts. So can I confirm with governing body we are happy to approve? Thank you. The second request is to approve that Leslie Smith as accountable officer and myself as chair sign off the letter of management representation on behalf of the governing body. Okay, thank you. And just picking up on Jackie's point there, which is actually in the letter, which is where any changes that come back from the submission to NHS England shall be delegated to the chair of the audit committee. Are we all happy with that? Perfect. Okay. And as Jackie's noted, there are a few audit declarations for us just to chase up, and we will do that before Leslie and myself sign off that letter. Okay. Jackie, as always, thank you to you and to the entire finance team. It's been a particularly challenging year with changing financial regimes, a pandemic to cope with. It's been absolutely sterling work, and I'm always amazed at how the team managed to get it done in time. So do pass on sincere thanks from governing body to everybody in the team that's contributed.
I will do. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Right, I'll move us now on to item 6. That's paper B in your noting pack, and that is NHS Sheffield CCG's annual report, again for the financial year 2020 to 2021. And I'm going to hand over to Kath Tilney, our Associate Director of Corporate Services, to introduce it.
Thank you, Chair. So I just wanted to start off by thanking all the staff, because there's a lot of staff that have been involved in pulling the report together. And there were 5 in particular I wanted to highlight, and that's Jane Howcroft, who's here on this call with us, Diane Mason from Finance, Sue Lang from Governance, Erin Brady from Comms, and last but not least, Carol Henderson, who's been through it with her eagle eyes to make sure that we've dotted all the T's, and not dotted, dotted the T's and dotted the I's and crossed the T's. So the annual report is a really good summary of our key achievements during a very challenging year. And following this item that we're doing now, we've got Jane and we've got people joining the meeting now that are going to present to us some of the key themes, and they're also going to talk about the achievements they're most proud of. So we'll move on to that after this. I shared a draft with you on the 6th of May. Of the version, and it hasn't really changed that much since. It's been NHS England and the external auditors and have been through it, given their feedback. There wasn't many changes, but we have incorporated what was suggested. We've had the final audit opinion, which has been updated in the report. So really, it doesn't look a lot different from the version you saw before. As Anthea confirmed earlier, it's been to audit committee this morning, and they approve it to come through to his for final approval. And I think that's probably all I need to say. So what I'm asking for today is for governing body to approve that, and then that will enable Leslie to sign the various sections within it. There's quite a few sections for Leslie to sign, and then we've got it all done. So I think that's it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Kath. So before we go on to that approval, we will be hearing from various members of our teams that you will see sort of slowly joining the call over the next few minutes. So there will be a lot of detail from that report, in particular some of the work that we've been doing coming out soon. However, do governing body members have any questions or comments on the report that they'd like to highlight at this stage? So any comments? Sorry, my screen's just gone a bit funny there. You've all moved around. Okay, Mark Gamsu, please.
Yeah, thanks. I'm Mark Gamsu, lay member on the CCG. I mean, I really welcome that. I mean, so this is an affirmation, the report, of the huge range and quality of the work that the CCG has done over the last year. And it feels really very strong and very rich. And I suppose the only thing, and I think you might maybe hinted at this, Terry, is are we going to be using the report to produce some smaller pieces of information or work that will connect with the public, but also make sure that some of the things that are in here, which is about how we work, gets embedded in the development of the new system going forward. So it's a very big document, but there's a lot in it, and I suppose I just want some reassurance that we're going to produce a shorter version, but we're also going to pick out some of this material and use it going forward over the next few months to share with the public and other organisations in the city, and also back up to the ICS.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Just wonder if Leslie, whether you have any views on that in your dual role as our accountable officer and the deputy system lead in South Yorkshire and Bassett Law ICS.
Thank you, Chair. Leslie Smith, accountable officer for the CCG and deputy lead for the ICS. So I think our ambition on that, Mark, is a positive one. So in terms of, I think some really good ideas in there about unchunking pieces of this for local distribution and connection with local communities. And that's in our gift to take forward. In terms of the connection to the ICS, as we move into our transition year, the focus turns to the commissioning strategy for 22-23. And really keen that we start that work in the summer of this year, because that will entail bringing the commissioning strategies and the work of all of the CCGs together into a plan for next year. And I describe this, and when talking to Sandy, about the bridge and the legacy in terms of where we are now in Sheffield, and how that locks into that future world as well. So we should be starting our work on that future plan, which hopefully then is that how the things that we've started in the last year and before and in this year continue into the future. So lots of risks around it, but we have a plan to mitigate those.
Okay, thank you, Leslie. Any further comments or questions? Okay, thank you. So governing body are being asked to approve the final annual report, which this time incorporates the annual governance statement and all relevant sections and declarations are to be signed by the accountable officer. So can I check governing body are happy to approve that report? Thank you. And in particular, just want to highlight the authors of that paper on behalf of Sheffield CCG. So Jane is with us. Thank you, Jane. Diane Mason, Erin Brady, and finally Sue Lang, who is on the call. And this will be Sue's final annual report to write up for us. And thank you so much, Sue, for everything you've done for Sheffield and the NHS over, I think it's a 4-decade career span. And we wish you the very happiest retirement, and hope you really enjoy that next chapter of your life. So very best of luck, Sue, from the governing body, and super thank you for this report, which has been really different this year. So thank you. So are we all approving?
Yep.
Thank you very much. Okay, so I'm going to so this next item really ties into this current part we've discussed on the report. What we felt this year was, rather than go through the report section by section and perhaps a dry receipt of a report from governing body, we wanted to invite some of the teams that have actually been involved in many of those projects that have been highlighted throughout this year's annual report, and to share the work that we've been doing as a CCG directly with the governing body, hear about the projects that have been undertaken, and really celebrate some of the great work that we've been doing over the past 12 months. So I'm going to hand over to Kath Tilney again and Jane Howcroft to introduce this next item.
Okay, hello everyone, and thank you for inviting us to come and present. Slightly nervous because 2 people haven't arrived yet, but I think by the time we get to their bit, they'll be here. So yes, people have been asked to come and talk about something that they're really proud of that they did last year. So it's a little snippet. Hopefully it's an insight for you into some of the work that's gone on. It can only be a snapshot. And we've grouped it around the 4 themes of the annual report. So the first theme is integration, and that's all about how we're bringing all the different parts of health and care together around patients to meet their needs, and really trying to orchestrate that. So our first example is from Lisa Renshaw, who's going to talk about a very interesting piece of work that she did that had a national profile. Thank you, Lisa.
Hi everybody. Prior to COVID in Sheffield, the CCG Infection Prevention and Control team worked to build relationships with colleagues in Sheffield City Council, Public Health England and within the CCG. We agreed the need for a robust approach to infection prevention and control in care homes. In 2019, while continuing to prioritise the importance of IPC and the need to further support improvements, I put a proposal to the Infection Prevention Society, which is a national society for a special interest group for care homes. This was accepted and the group now has over 200 members. It was during my role as coordinator for this group that I co-authored the national training package with Professor Jenny Wilson. She's now the president of the IPS. This was a valuable resource for care homes on a national level and was very well received. I also provided input into a COVID training package with colleagues in NHSE and wrote a further 2 training packages which are now being delivered to care homes on a local level by colleagues in Sheffield City Council. Although I'm proud of my achievements with the IPS, my greatest achievement is my role within the CCG IPC team. During COVID, myself and Nicky Littlewood have found the determination and resilience to work through the exceptional circumstances which have probably been the most challenging in our careers. It has strengthened us as a team and made us more determined to continue in our work in raising the profile of IPC in Sheffield. COVID has further highlighted the need to support care homes and GP practices with their IPC requirements. We've learned there's still a lot more work to be done. Our role in itself is challenging, and we have to work hard to build relationships and deal with conflict, as our advice is not always well received. Everything we do is for the benefit of the resident and patient, and I always think how I would like to be cared for. As a team, we always do the right thing, which is not necessarily the easiest, but that's because that's what nurses do. I'm proud to be a nurse, and I always keep the resident and the patient at the heart of everything I do. The day I stop caring is the day I will stop nursing. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa, for sharing that. And I can see a round of applause coming from our governing body. So thank you, Lisa. That was a really, really heartfelt statement. And we are a clinical commissioning group, and that really underlined to me the importance of that clinical drive from that whole broad range of clinicians that work with us in Sheffield CCG. So thank you very much for that. Does anybody have any comments or questions they wish to share with Lisa before we go back to Jane? Judy, please.
Just, you brought tears to my eyes, Lisa. That's exactly what we're all about. That was so brilliant how you put it across, and bringing that to life, what you've all been able to do, and not shying away from the conflict and, you know, like you described, persevering. Really, really well done. Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further comments or questions? No. Thank you so much, Lisa. I'll hand back over to Jane, please.
Thank you. I just wanted to briefly mention two other examples of integrated care. One has been led by the mental health team, and particularly James Sutherland, but not exclusively. And that's our new service to help people with more complex mental health needs. And it's one of 12 national pilot sites. And it helps people with things like panic disorder and trauma, and it's delivered in primary care, and it involves specialists from the voluntary sector. So it's a more specialist service than we had before, and it's more local to where people are living. So it's very exciting. It's been a lot of work. The other piece of work I wanted to mention was the work that we've done in partnership with the local authority, voluntary sector, police and fire around supporting homeless people and rough sleepers during the COVID pandemic, and a wraparound approach to try and find people, help them into accommodation, help them into healthcare, and then latterly making sure that they got access to their COVID vaccine. So it's been a really huge piece of work. Alistair described it as quite humbling, actually. So I just wanted to mention that as another example of things that we've done that have been different this year. The next theme in our annual report is actually how we've responded to COVID and its impact on our population and its impact on our services. And Sapphire and Joe are going to talk about a really important project that they were involved in. Thank you.
Thanks, Jane. I'm going to kick off and then I'll hand over to Joe. So for anybody that doesn't know me, I'm Sapphire Johnson. My day job is normally as the head of commissioning for children, young people and maternity. But last year I was redeployed into setting up the community swabbing service, which originally started off as testing service for primary care. And then very quickly we expanded that up to testing for pharmacy, dentistry, optometry, voluntary sector, social care, and eventually ended up testing care home residents and workers as well. And we managed to set that up really quickly. So from within a week of establishing the project team, we were doing our first tests. We were 10 days ahead of the national service in doing that. Right from the very beginning, we were able to get things like test results back onto people's medical records, which is something that it took the national team months to do. Being so kind of ahead of the curve meant that we could share that learning with other parts of the system and other parts of the country. So we were giving advice every day to the regional testing cell about how to set up their testing service and their guidance and things like that. And our peripatetic swabbing team who went out testing in the care homes, that was actually used as an example of good practice in the DHSD guidance. So we're really proud of how quickly we managed to set that up. And as a rough estimate, we think that we cut the amount of time frontline workers had to spend self-isolating by around 4,200 days, which we think is quite impressive. And the only way we were able to do that is because of everybody's commitment and enthusiasm and determination to make it happen. I have always been really proud to work for the NHS, and we all know what makes the NHS is its people. And I was just constantly amazed and inspired and in awe of all the people that helped to make that service happen. Nothing was ever too much trouble. Nobody ever said no. Everybody just came together to make it happen. And when everything got difficult or we came up against a problem, we all got together and came up with a solution to it. Nothing was ever too big an issue. We just got on with it. So I'm going to hand you over to Jo, who's one of the nurses that worked in the service, to tell you a little bit more about how it worked day to day.
Thank you, Sapphire. And for those that don't know me, my name's Jo Watson. I've worked for the NHS, unfortunately, again, about 35, 36 years. So yeah, I've been around a little while. With the service for the swabbing, it was mainly led by the primary care development nurses, but it was a multi-organisational team approach to everything. And the things that I found I was really proud of from the service was how successful we were at working across organisational boundaries. We came together as a whole team, and a real whole team, which was very different from what I've experienced in the past. When I've tried to do things across organisations, there's always been a lot of difficulty around roles and things. It was a totally different attitude. It worked very quickly. We built relationships and partnerships right across the multidisciplinary team and multidisciplinary organisations. We managed to develop this integrated and a real hybrid way of working across the board. For me, I think the members of the team actually had ownership of the service rather than buy-in. It was a real difference, and it provided a culture of sort of naturally taking responsibility, and members were more engaged. There was more commitment, and they were given opportunities to be directly involved in developing the service, right from people swabbing right through to people leading the service altogether. We adapted a very open yes we can philosophy, and we're really a positive attitude that increased flexibility and adaptability, so we were able to find solutions, as Sapphire said, really quickly, with very much using a team approach, especially if there was any negativity or any difficulties that came around. And thinking about the conflict, actually there was very little conflict that we experienced within the team because of that attitude. We quickly developed trust within the team. Everything was very open and honest. We were really sharing information, sharing solutions, issues, and we actually developed a culture where everyone was valued and everybody's contribution was vital to what we were actually putting together, and that helped to build team resilience. The service was delivered at speed, but we remained clinically safe, and we were very much learning together. Nobody had heard of PCR testing. We didn't know what it was. We'd never heard of anything. So it was we were all on a real big learning curve, but that was, again, all of us were in the same boat. Team members felt assured. They embraced the opportunities that were given to them. Feedback from the team has been that they felt proud and had a real purpose in such strange times, and they particularly enjoyed working with new people and using that collaborative way of working, and that actually enhanced what they got out of putting the service together. And feedback from the service users was exceedingly positive. Comments like the fears were erased by the professionalism of the staff, and the overall experience was rated as good or very good, with high levels of satisfaction. And leading on from all this is that we have still got those relationships ongoing that we've done across the different organisations. And I know myself, we've used those relationships in other work that we've done since, in other projects, in service development for the benefit of the people of Sheffield. And on a very personal note, I mean, it was an absolute pleasure to be involved and to work with such a great team of professionals to deliver such a successful service in a very little time, in that real period of flux and change. And it shows that with a belief and the right culture, you can actually achieve a win-win for all. Thank you.
So thank you, Joanne and Sapphire. I know we'd kind of moved on to the next theme, which was talking about COVID response. But my notes that I've been scribbling down here almost takes us back to the first theme, Jane, which is integration. This was integration between organisations, integration between professional groups. And Sapphire, I'm astounded at the number of days of time that had saved to get healthcare workers back looking after people with COVID. I've not come across that number before, but it is astounding. And it's a real testament to the service. And then just to hear the people who have used the service have had positive experiences, really kind of, it spells quality of service. And I think that's something we should rightly be proud of. So I can see a hand's gone up by Lee Sorsby. Lee, do you want to come in, please?
Yes, thank you. Congratulations to both of you, just to a brilliant presentation, really. I think at a time when everybody is feeling that life is a bit tough at the moment, this is so refreshing. And just thinking about those number of days that you quoted, Sapphire, I think you shouldn't just think that you've saved days at work. That's probably saved lives as well. And I think that's really important. And what I heard from both of you, but particularly, well, actually both of you, is that there was lots of cross-organisational working. There were no barriers. There was a sense of ownership. There was shared goals. Everyone felt included and valued from whatever stage of the process they were at. No one said no. There was a can-do attitude. And it's just music to our ears, this, isn't it? And I just feel, I mean, I feel overwhelmed with gratitude to be a tiny part of this system that has worked so well together. But also I feel saddened that it's taken a pandemic to make this happen. And I suppose, I don't want to dampen, the joy and the glow that we're feeling from this, but actually, there's a really important point about very, very quick learning about how that happened. What were the levers that enabled that to happen apart from a global pandemic, and to harness that positivity and that sense of agency and ownership, because all the other things that we face in the NHS are just as deadly and just as threatening, but perhaps not as immediate and obvious as a pandemic. And, to see what is possible and what can be achieved, it would be tragic if we lost what we've learned from that. So that would just be my plea to all of us, really, as a system, is to quickly harness what enabled that to happen, and try and take that forward as we're facing this new emerging landscape in front of us.
Thank you, Lee. Alan Windle, please.
Sorry, I moved pictures. I was on mute in there, Chair. I moved to the other side of the screen. It would be amiss of me to say at this point, one section that isn't in the annual report that links back to the primary care development nurses, but recognising the work in an integrated way, is that they received a national award for their work throughout the past 12 months. And we couldn't squeeze it in because it was a secret to them to begin with. And we will sing about it for the next 12 months. And so, yeah, thank you, Sapphire, for that leadership and support. And yet again, Joanne, back to the team and everybody, really well done, really, really well done, and so proud. Yeah. Proud that you work in my team. You don't. I know.
Thank you, Alan.
Really well done. Really well done.
Yeah, thank you. Obviously the primary care development nurses were really proud of what they've achieved from there, but we're still very much around the work that we did within swabbing was a much wider team than just us. It was huge, and it was just a pleasure.
Okay, thank you. I'll hand back over to Jane for theme number 3.
Oh, well, we're still on theme number 2, but we're taking a different turn now, because I'm going to invite my colleagues from the community engagement and participation team, Helen and Richard, to talk about the really important work they've been doing, hearing people's voices and experiences during the last year. Thank you.
Thanks, Jane. Yeah, for anybody who doesn't know, I'm Richard Kennedy. I'm one of the engagement managers, and my colleague Helen will be joining me to tell you a couple of things. So since the CCG was formed, the engagement team have been continually improving how we discharge our statutory duties around involvement, as well as building relationships with our communities. And last year we were proud to be recognised by NHS England as being outstanding in our patient and community engagement, which has been a journey kind of climbing up that ladder to be recognised as such. And then for the last 14 months, they have been devastating for a lot of our communities, but it has provided us with an opportunity to hear, to assist, to invest in, to build relationships and trust within those communities. And we're going to speak to you about 3 pieces of work that we're particularly proud of for doing those things.
Hi everyone, so I'm Helen Mulholland. I'm the other half of Richard and Helen. And the first thing I wanted to talk to you about was the Community Insights log. So if we think back to March last year, we were aware that what we were hearing from community leaders and from different people across the city was different. And there was huge inequalities in terms of how different people were experiencing the pandemic, both in terms of COVID itself, but also in terms of the lockdown and the implications of lockdown for families and for individuals. And we started to gather that insight, that lived experience really early on. So at the beginning of March, at the end of March last year. And to date, we've gathered around 800 pieces of individual information about lived experience in this brilliant city. And that has given us enormous insight into how people have experienced it. It's kind of a piece of social history. Last year, we were able to feed that information into our teams here, and that was a positive experience. We were also able to feed that information into our rapid health impact assessments that were obviously led by our public health team. We fed it into SHAR and information that they've been developing and working on behalf of the Health and Wellbeing Board, and it's been shared widely across our ACP partners. So as those 800 pieces of insight, as a piece of kind of social history, I think that we will look back on that and we will continue to look into that as we continue with our commissioning intentions moving forward as a city and much wider. Then if I think about the end of last year, kind of the autumn time, and we were all very concerned about flu and about COVID and the mix there and that toxic mix. And so what we wanted to do was work more closely with our community partners in our voluntary community and faith sector organisations. We were doing a lot of work with public health at the time, and we had a conversation with lovely Jackie, and we said, could we have a little bit of money please to invest in these community organisations? She said yes, very kindly, and we worked with 10 organisations, including organisations like SACMA, like Dana Wellbeing, like Unity Gym, some really tiny organisations in the city. And we asked those 10 organisations, they were all given £1,000 each to develop a plan, to co-produce a plan for how they could talk to local people about having their flu vaccine. And that was done through a whole variety of different ways, whether it was food banks, whether it was on community radio. It was done in culturally appropriate ways by our community leaders who know our communities best. And so having those in-depth conversations, often on a one-to-one basis, was the difference between people choosing to have their flu vaccine or not have their flu vaccine. And we were able to use that and the plans that those organisations developed to then learn, knowing that the COVID vaccine was coming just a couple of months later. So that kind of pilot made an enormous difference in terms of encouraging people to have the vaccine, but the ways that we were working in partnership across the city. I'm going to hand over to Richard now, just talk a little bit about the COVID vaccine stuff.
Yeah, so once the COVID vaccination programme was announced back in December of last year, encouraging the people of Sheffield to take up that offer of the vaccine became one of our key priorities. And national and local insight was telling us that there were some communities that were hesitant about the vaccine, and that there were some others that may face barriers to actually getting the vaccine, even if they wanted to. So, and there was a lot of concern that the impact that this would have on health inequalities across Sheffield. So in response, we planned and delivered a community engagement project, which is ongoing at the moment. We've invested £235,000 into 26 local community organisations. And these community organisations have been picked because of their long-standing and trusted links with the communities that we identified as being less likely to take up the offer of the COVID vaccine, and because of the work that we'd done with them previously. And we knew how trusted they are within their communities and how much they would bring to this project. So through the project, we wanted to engage people in ways that suited them, sharing key messages to build confidence of the vaccine, overcome barriers and mistrust, and encourage the uptake of the vaccine. We also wanted to gain insights into the reasons of why people were hesitant, why they might be facing barriers, so we can shape dynamically, flexibly as we go along in our rollout of the vaccine programme. And it's enabled us to directly work with these organisations, utilising the skills and knowledge within these communities to reach all of their communities. It's all been planned and delivered by the organisations themselves. When we talk about co-production, this is almost a devolved way of working. You know, we've kind of set a shared ideals and aims of wanting to engage and gain insight, but how that's delivered, we have completely trusted these organisations to go about and choose and deliver that, which I think is essential to the success of it. And based on the latest national information that we have, it's having a significant impact. So Sheffield has the highest uptake of the vaccine compared to the 9 core UK cities outside of London. So, we hope that this is playing a significant part within that, and obviously it goes with all of the rest of the work that everybody's putting into that. So this is saving lives ultimately, and it's great to hear. But even more than that are the individual stories that Helen and I hear on a daily basis from these organisations. They're so heartwarming, and they're of stories of these community organisations going above and beyond to support the people within their communities. And it starts from reading their vaccination letters for people whose English isn't their first language, to making their appointments, to taking them to their appointment, to have their vaccinations, holding their hands whilst they're having the vaccinations, and even shopping for them if they're feeling unwell after having it. And this experience that these communities are having now will determine how they interact with health services in the future. So it's not just having an impact at the moment for COVID. Hopefully the building of this trust within communities, but the lasting legacy of the CCG as well, and of health services in Sheffield will hopefully have a longer lasting legacy as well.
And just finally, just to say, it is about us as an organisation listening and hearing to communities and to individuals. And the more that our decision making is rooted in our communities, the better decisions that we will make. So the other thing to just say is about the sustainability of the voluntary community and faith sector. Without them, we would never have been able to do this work. It's about the trusted relationships that they have with communities, and so this work has all been delivered in a culturally appropriate, with community languages, in ways and means that have meant that people have been able to engage on an individual basis and have a genuine dialogue, and then that's changed behaviour. And so that's why really we're super proud of this work, but we're even more proud of the VCF sector in this city.
Thank you both. Really heartwarming stories again. And I am taking some notes here, and I do hope everyone will stay together, because I think there's I can see some really strong themes emerging here. But I can see we've already got some people eager to feedback or to ask some questions. So I'm going to bring Chris in, please.
Hi, Helen and Richard. Wow, that was fantastic. And I'm privileged to be able to see some of the insights fairly early on and hear those stories. And they influence such a lot of the work, and which you can see in practice. I think a lot of that was about some of the things that you recognise about the trust, about listening, but then taking some action. So you put into place some of the things where there was barriers and people could see that. So that's affected that all round, from COVID and testing, vaccination, but also that mutual support. And where we've had really good relationships with primary care and voluntary sector, not where we've had those in most places in Sheffield, you've seen such a big positive input pact, and the volunteers that have worked in partnership with primary care. So I want to congratulate you on the award, and also recognise that this has been part of our whole structure with Speak and where we want to go in the future, because as you were saying, it's the best way to commission services, and I hope that we'll carry this on, this culture of working into the next structure. So I know it was a lot in there, but it's such dear to my heart, this area of work. So thanks very much.
Thanks, Chris. Mark Gamsu, please.
Yeah, thanks, Terry. I mean, as everyone knows, I mean, as the chair of Speak, it's been fantastic working with the team and indeed with the other members on the committee. We've still got a little while to go, so I'm still looking forward to the next few months. But I just want to say that I think, you know, listening to, there's been a bit of a story with all. I mean, obviously I know more about the work that Rich and Helen have been doing, but listening to the earlier presentations as well, the key bit here is about relationships and trust and understanding that people have, you know, through Joanne, Sapphire and others who've spoken, with organisations that exist in the city. And I'm not convinced at the moment that there's an understanding across some of the other potential players in the city that is understood sufficiently. I think people sort of acknowledge it in principle, but are not completely clear about what that means, because I think the CCG has led, and you would expect it to, on building those trusted relationships, strategic relationships with a range of organisations. And I think just because of where particularly the other NHS organisations in the city sit and how they have been traditionally performance managed and everything else, they haven't got that same depth that we have developed. I know that Leslie and Terry, who are key to this, are aware of the importance of ensuring that we build on what we already have. I think, you know, I would just say that as long as we continue to be here, we need to keep an eye on what that actually means. And that doesn't mean I don't trust them to at all.
Thank you, Mark. Any further comments to come through? Any further reflections? Trish Edney, please.
Thank you. I mean, obviously, stirring work and well done, and the whole response to COVID has been fantastic. But I just query and put in a note of caution. You've had this wonderful setup to help with communities. What lessons have you learnt? These letters going out for vaccinations and appointments and other things to patients are computer driven. You've got a wonderful computer system now that tells you where your patients are, what they're doing, etc. You should be able to surely send them out a letter in the right language now and not have to have community organizations to help translate them. Yes, obviously there are going to be reading problems for patients and communication problems, but it's a lesson to learn from the activities that you've had to do already.
Okay, thank you, Trish. Something for us to feed back to our digital leads across CCGs and indeed across the country. I think it's a valid point that you can go onto a website and get that in multiple languages. I think it's something we need to consider in health. So again, Helen and Richard, thank you both for those stories. And whilst we're on vaccination, I think it's just another testament really to our membership. So to our GPs in our city that were absolutely fundamental in delivering our biggest ever flu vaccination campaign. And obviously the COVID vaccination campaign has been the biggest vaccination campaign of anything ever. And we know that 75% of those vaccines have been delivered through primary care, who are under immense pressure, absolutely busting a gut. So I think, you know, the combination of that and that great engagement has made an absolutely huge difference to those populations, particularly those vulnerable populations. So I'm going to hand back over to Jane, please.
Yes, I didn't want to leave COVID without mentioning the team at the CCG who've worked on vaccination, Alan's team, Richard and Karen and Joy, and all of the work that's been done by locality managers and practice managers and GPs. Sitting as I do, looking at the COVID inbox every day, seeing the letters that come out saying, don't do it like that, do it like this. I think the phrase turn on a sixpence really comes into play. People have been so responsive. It's been amazing. And also wanted to mention some unsung heroes who our GP members will know about, who are our IT team. At the beginning of all this, we're just delivering laptops, headsets, sorting out software so that practices could start to work remotely and do online triage. And that was a superhuman effort. You know, people were delivering equipment all over the city. So that was fantastic as well. So moving more to the CCG as an organisation and thinking about ourselves, our next theme is about cultural change and developing our staff and developing our culture. And I'd like to introduce my colleagues Helen Pinchbeck and Danielle Graham, who are going to give us an insight into some of the work that they've been doing. Thank you.
Thanks, Jane. So I'm Helen Pinchbeck, the OD and Learning and Development Business Partner for the South Yorkshire and Bassett Law CCGs. So as you know, COVID took over most of last year and this year too. And as a CCG, we've adapted really well to working in remote ways. So as Jane mentioned, the IT team have been brilliant. So all those who needed a laptop have one. And we now have a COVID secure office, which is no mean feat. So wellbeing has been at the heart of everything we do and has been pushed into our conscious when making decisions and innovating ideas. We very quickly learned the functions of Zoom and MS Teams, even if we'd not heard of them before COVID, and coming up with some creative ways of staying connected with each other and maintaining morale in such challenging times. Our Onwards and Upwards Cultural Change programme embraced virtual sessions and supported our new ways of working. So initially it was externally delivered. We now have 5 CCGs trained staff who are delivering the 2-day programme. And they have also devised bite-sized sessions using the tools and techniques from the programme to support staff in the what we're calling the Beating the COVID Blues 45-minute accessible sessions. So these include topics such as time management and beating bad habits. So as autumn approached in 2020, we launched our winter wellness campaign. So our weekly roundup emails and intranet pages were filling up with ideas and support for staff's physical, mental, financial and parental wellbeing. We've had photo competitions and encouraged staff to share tips on how to look after your mental health through a Jamboard to create a community of practice. And our Pilates and yoga sessions, formerly face-to-face, went online and we signed up to the hashtag Doing Our Bit platform, which are professional trainers giving back to the NHS with online recorded sessions on high and low impact, family fun, stretches, hydration and lots more. So check it out if you haven't done so already. Our Time to Talk Ficas have been so popular. Staff have asked for them on a monthly basis. So it's a really great way to boost the start of your day and see people outside of your day-to-day work bubble. And the COVID learning group was established early on in lockdown 1. So staff across the CCG of all levels, including governing body members, joined up to this listening group, helping to collate staff stories and highlight their COVID journeys. So this group met regularly and was a great leveller as people shared their experiences from all different perspectives. So on a personal level, individual work level, project groups and teams. And this included making recommendations back to the organisation as well, many of which have already been implemented. So the outcome of the COVID learning group work, the feedback received from the staff temperature check survey, and a general shift of encouragement of people to speak up and share their ideas and creativity. So for example, at the fortnightly online staff briefings, has and will continue to change the way we work forever for the better. So staff have been involved in developing and reviewing HR policies, such as the email, team working and video conferencing policy and the new home working policy as well. And as and when all COVID restrictions have been lifted, the CCG is taking a refreshing approach of allowing a 3-month period of staff to readjust to life back into the office. So they can trial blending working so they can make an informed decision about how they want to work in the future on an individual, team and organisational basis. So we've saved a lot of money and reduced our carbon footprint by embracing new technology and reducing travel and printing. And there are many other newfound benefits that will stay and are being incorporated into new established work streams, such as the 722 and the new normal. We had to be adaptive to work and home situations, from flexible working to incorporate homeschooling and caring for others into our working day, to providing support to our staff on eventualities they may face. So our mental health first aiders continue to meet regularly and discuss current topics of contact and support available, plus arranging sessions on musculoskeletal advice with physios, to psychological first aid and anxiety on coming out of lockdown with our IAPT colleagues. We've taken our internal training online. So for example, our management and leadership course, HR courses such as recruitment and selection and risk management. We've also ensured sensitive topics are not forgotten about too. So for example, bullying and harassment prevention, and talking about suicide. And we've been approached to present at the ICS Roadshow for suicide prevention to share our work on this. Our coaching offer has remained and is available for all staff through our CCG qualified coaches. So they have regular supervision and CPD, but there's also the Leadership Academy national offer of coaches for all staff across the NHS as well. Our wellbeing services, such as the Employee Assistance Programme and being signed up as a mindful employer, provides confidential advice and signposting free for all staff. So as you can see, there's a lot of great work happened and happening, and with so many staff being key to all of this being successful, far too many to mention. But we're not stopping there. We will strive to continue to support and help improve wellbeing culture of the CCG. After all, this directly impacts on the health and well-being of the Sheffield community, of which most of us are part of. We've got upcoming projects we are working on, such as raising awareness and support on the menopause. And our full staff survey results will be available next month. And the survey questions were developed by our own staff members, and the feedback from that will help inform our future endeavours. So hopefully I've given you a good flavour of the activity that has happened during the last year. I've certainly enjoyed it, and I'm proud to be part of all the activities that I've mentioned. So I'll hand you over to Danielle now and to talk to you about our equality and inclusion work.
Thank you, Helen. As an organisation, there is a lot to be proud of, in particular the events, celebration, changes we have made from an equality, diversity and inclusive perspective. It has been a journey for the organisation, however, being mindful of the achievements have been over just a short period of months. The impact of COVID-19 and the death of George Floyd shone the spotlight on the inequality faced by minority communities, in particular from a healthcare perspective. The impact of this has empowered colleagues such as myself to reflect on our lived experiences For me, this was in the form of a poem, which was spoken and shared at staff briefing, although highly emotive, was very well received. To get a better understanding of the challenges and difficulties faced, colleagues attended the Black Lives Matter FICA sessions held in July and August 2020. During these virtual webinar sessions, staff had a supportive and confidential environment to share their personal lived experience and the opportunity to have open and honest conversations, looking at issues such as inequalities, racism, and microaggressions, to name a few. The Equality, Diversity, Inclusion Group was established and is driven by a group of staff who come together on a monthly basis to create solutions to problems and put them in place. It's seen as a new way of working that is truly engaging and makes it real for the entire workforce. With that, there has been an opportunity for a reverse mentoring session with myself and Leslie, and further opportunity to undertake reciprocal mentoring sessions across the CCG. Staff participated in the CCG's first Black History Month celebration in October, looking at the achievements and contributions made by individuals in healthcare, the arts, sports, and academia throughout history and the pandemic. We also invited colleagues to use the opportunity to make commitments on a personal and organisational level, with the option to share them anonymously on the Jamboard. One of the favourite events was an audience with special guest speaker, Johnny Nelson. In February of this year, we celebrated the progress and diversity of the LGBT+ community to raise awareness of the journey and the progress made, but also the impact and ongoing challenges faced. Staff took part in activities such as designing the Pride flag as part of the Body, Mind and Soul theme. There were also virtual learning lunch sessions which shared personal experience, in particular of people being transgender, but also a reflection of being gay in alternate world. As an EDI group, we have achieved a lot in the past year, which I am very proud of personally and professionally, and we continue to make impactful changes, not only for the workforce, but for the population we serve. As an organisation, we have a lot of fantastic activity around all aspects of cultural development. With that, we are in the process of submitting an entry for the Health Service Journal on the Staff Engagement Award. As Helen noted, the results of the CCG staff survey are due to be received next month, which we'll use to highlight key achievements, but also use as a framework to identify any further improvement. We cannot get complacent as we are mindful that technology and the organisation are evolving at pace. Feedback from the temperature check and other forums have indicated there are still pockets across the CCG where full staff engagement needs to happen. There is much more that we can do individually, but also at an organisational level. On behalf of Helen and myself, thank you for listening.
Thank you both again. It's a really interesting reflection to see how much has happened in the previous 12 months. And when we hear these stories, when we hear these experiences and everything that is continuing, it's almost amazing that happened in a pandemic whilst there was all of those other things to deal with. So absolutely huge thank you to both of you for coming and sharing those. And I'm almost going to come back to Sapphire's comments when she presented the NHS is made by its people. And I think there were some really important bits in there about how we look after our people, how we support them and how we value them. So any questions from members of governing body? Leslie.
Thank you, Terry, and just to say so very proud of everyone who works in the CCG and those who perhaps have stepped out of their comfort zone this afternoon to come along and deliver these presentations. The way my technology works is my new emails pop in from the side while I'm on screen, so I get the opportunity to see what's coming next. And coming next, as we were going through this, was the appointment for you and I to attend the CCG's annual assessment. And Jane's been very busy filling in the largest template of everything we've done in the last 12 months for the annual assessment. And my first thought was, well, actually, we could just submit a link to this recording, starting from the point when Jane came on through to this point. So, but I imagine you've got lots of work on that template done, Jane. But if we don't do that, what we will do, I think, is make sure we save the recording and just play at our annual assessment everything from when we come on to the celebratory item through to this point. And I think that will pick up on the theme about the NHS is its people and express what we think we have achieved over the last 12 months through this recording. And we all get to be at the annual assessment.
Thank you, Leslie. Any further comments or questions before I hand back to Jane? Nope, back over to you, Jane.
I just wanted to say, as a staff member, that the work that Helen and Danielle describe has been really important to us all, because when you're sitting at home beavering away, you can feel really lonely and unconnected to the rest of the organisation. So all of the activities that they describe help you to carry on working in the wider context. And also, I think, you know, when it's been really tough, I think we have felt cared for. You know, I think we felt that people have concern for us, you know, for our bad backs and for our low moods. So yeah, I just wanted to respond to that by saying that. The last theme is governance, and governance is like the undergirding that makes all of this happen. And yes, I mean, there truly are some unseen heroes in this part. And I just wanted to mention the business managers who normally support the executive directors, and they've also done a sterling job. There was a point when there was so many meetings about COVID, starting early, finishing late, and everything had to be logged. Every decision had to be justified, and we had to have a very complete audit trail. And there was a small army of people doing all of that. And that's about kind of keeping us safe and being able to demonstrate later that we had a good justification for everything that we did. And of course, Sue Lang and her team are very important to all of this, all of the work that they do for us on risk and governance. And we got an internal audit opinion of significant assurance, which is fantastic. And just looking at Jackie and thinking about her team, all of the work that goes on behind the scenes to make sure that all the bills can be paid, people can be paid, it's amazing. And I sit near my finance colleagues normally at 722, and there's some of them I haven't seen for over a year, and I miss them. And also information governance, which is a massive legal requirement. If we get that wrong, there are huge ramifications. And again, we've had the highest assurance level for that. So thanks to Gershon and all the team there. There's so many other people who we can't mention, but you know, it really is a team effort. So it's been lovely to celebrate some of the work this afternoon. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Jane. So I was just scribbling a few things, going back to some of the early pages in this report. And I'm just going to bring us back. So often annual reports feel like they're quite dry and we receive them, and I've really enjoyed hearing all of this today. But I just want to take us back to page 6 on the annual report, and it outlines 5 organisational objectives that we have as a CCG, and I think through the examples we've heard today, we are definitely contributing to each of those 5 objectives. So our first objective is to reduce the impact of health inequalities on people's health and well-being through working with Sheffield City Council and our partners. And we've heard about those examples of integration with partners across the city. We've heard about treating our communities as equal partners in what they do. And those things have made a real impact on inequalities in those communities. The second objective we have is to lead the improvement of quality of care and standards. And again, we've heard a couple of examples this afternoon where we really have led that improvement of quality. Our third objective is to bring care closer to home. And there's some examples that Jane has brought up during her additional examples there of integration, about us having more complex care being delivered in primary care networks closer to people's homes. We have our fourth objective, which is to improve healthcare sustainability and affordability. And again, we've heard Sapphire's example there of helping make our system more sustainable with those huge numbers of days saved and indeed lives saved with that. And our fifth objective, which is to be a caring employer that values diversity and maximizes the potential of our people. So I'm really grateful to Jane and colleagues who have brought back those examples, because they really do underline for me how, as a CCG, we are working to meet those strategic objectives. I have a final reflection on this one, which is I think a lot of that is underpinned by our behaviours and our values as a CCG. And I think there are so many examples that we've heard this afternoon that go back to our 4 sets of values as a CCG. So our first one being empowering. Not only were we empowering our staff, but our staff were empowering our communities to make a difference. We have seen lots of examples of being progressive, being compassionate and caring, and fair, honest, responsible, and accountable. So I think it's nice to tie those examples back and actually say, you know, are we really doing what we set out to achieve as an organisation? So any further reflections or questions from governing body for those members of staff that have joined us this afternoon? Just a round of applause, I think. Brilliant. So thank you, everybody. And I think as a governing body, we are really, really pleased and really, really proud to hear all of those examples. Okay, thank you. So I'll move us now swiftly on to the final part of our agenda, which are the reports circulated in advance for noting. So that's paper 7, which is the full annual report, which we have just discussed. Are there any other any items of other business that haven't been declared so far? Nope. Perfect. So, as I always do at the end of our public governing body meetings, is to ask just for some reflections from governing body members about what they've heard today, what you will go away and do differently, and what you'll go away and tell your various professional teams. So, as always, if I could have one of our GPs, one of our lay members, and one of our executive team, please. Lisa, please.
Hey, I'm Lisa Phillip. I'm one of the GPs on the governing body. I just wanted to say that it's been so nice to hear the reports and to bring them to life and hear about the things that have been happening at the CCG and in the community. I think it's really heartwarming that things have changed and there's been a sort of culture shift. And I hope we can maintain that going forward, because it can only help us with service provision and planning in future. So it seems like there's so much that's happened in one short year, but it's very, very exciting.
Thank you. Lay member Chris Neild, please.
Yes, I totally agree. And it's impressive to hear it from the heart, from the people who've delivered this. And also, again, such significant barriers this year and people having to look at how we can do this differently to achieve that change. So really impressive work, and I think we've got such momentum there for that change for the future. So I will certainly be telling people about it. It's very exciting.
Thank you. And then from one of our executive team, please, Alan.
I'm just overwhelmed, I think, by what we've heard, and I haven't been a governing body that long in this past year, and I just can't believe how much we've come through in that year, 2 years now that I've been in the CCG, in a year at governing body, and just the overwhelming people speaking about how we work in an integrated way, both internally but externally as well with partners. And while we'll always have problems or issues to face, we're facing them together through whatever will be in the future and whatever is now leading up to the future. I think it's just a really proud moment for governing body to sit back and reflect that while there's work to do, we've done so much this year. It's unbelievable. And well done to all our teams. Absolutely well done.
So thank you very much, Alan, for that feedback. And before I draw the meeting to a close, given this is our opportunity just to reflect on our annual review, I just wonder, Leslie, is there anything further you wish to add to those reflections at all?
I think I was struck by when you went through our objectives, and in the last objectives, the very last element of that was about maximising the potential of our people. And therefore, just the big sort of piece of learning from me, that if you get the conditions right and you empower people to use their potential, their ideas, innovation, and you have their backs and you trust them, you can achieve so much more. So there's loads of things that have happened, some of which I'm not that cited on, but people are just empowered to get on and make those changes and make those important changes for the people of Sheffield. And that's just, I think, as Alan said, it's quite overwhelming, it's quite emotional.
Okay, thank you, Leslie. I will draw today's meeting now to a close. Our next governing body meeting to take place in public will be on Thursday, the 1st of July at 2 p.m. So thank you to everybody for joining us this afternoon.